Last year, you may remember that Rishi Sunak, the Chancellor, introduced a £20 a week increase in payments to those 6 million people on universal credit. Now, he's under pressure to continue with that increase from the opposition and within his own party. And every time we do have a discussion about the universal credit increase, about how long that extra payment should stay in place, we have emails from viewers who have said that it actually doesn't go to people who are still on what the government calls legacy benefits, the old system of benefits, and that actually amounts to around 2 million people. One of them is Michelle, and she joins us from Norfolk. Michelle, what's your situation?
Hi, Joe. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome.
Yes, I'm a single parent and I'm a disabled person, and I have 2 children. I've been a single parent for quite some time. And yes, I was completely unaware of the uplift payment. It was only brought to my attention partway through the scheme because it did not apply to me as a disabled person. At that point, I was not entitled to it.
And is that because you are on the old sort of style of benefits? You're not on universal credit?
Yes, I was put onto the old style of benefits pre-pandemic, which in itself has changed very little. And obviously, I haven't had the opportunity to change now to entitle myself to that £20 uplift.
Can you give us an idea of what difference that £20 extra a week would make to your life?
Absolutely, yes. I'm a mum of 2, and I find that £20 sounds like a very small amount, but it's actually quite considerable when you consider the circumstances that a lot of people live in. £20 is getting on for half of my food budget with an almost teenage boy. As you can probably imagine, food is
eats a lot. Yeah.
Yes, and on top of that, there are other expenses such as the heating. I suffer from arthritis, so the cold can actually make things much worse for me. Myself and my son are both asthmatic, so we need to keep the heating on to keep the damp down. And on top of that, expenses for the children as well, because it's not just the claimant who is affected by this £20 uplift. It is the people around them. And for myself, it's my children. It's those people who are affected. My son, for example, cannot wear regular off-the-peg high school shoes because he has very wide feet. £20 buys me one shoe, one school shoe. So that shows you just how much it's needed.
Well, Michelle, thank you for spelling out exactly what it would do and the difference it would make having that increased payment. Now, we did try and call the Work and Pensions Department. They couldn't provide anyone for interview, but they have said in a statement that people should move on to universal credit. So someone like you should move on to the single benefit payment. What do you say to that?
I'm afraid this can has been kicked down the road for far too long. I became a single parent 7 years ago with the breakdown of my marriage. My daughter was a baby at the time. And every year at the job centre, they would assure me that this would be the year I would go onto universal credit, and that I was to save money from my benefits to cover a period of what was at the time 6 weeks with 0 income.
Yes.
Now currently 5 weeks, which is longer than most people have to wait for their wages. And so every year I've been promised that I would be moved onto universul credit.
And it hasn't
every year it hasn't happened.
Okay.
Now I contacted my own MP and I asked her, what could be done? And she contacted Treasury herself. And the party line was, if I would like to receive the uplift, I must volunteer to go on to universal credit. And in order to do that, I should endure the 5-week wait with 0 income with 2 dependent children.
Yes.
As a responsible mother, I cannot do that.
All right,
I cannot possibly do that.
Let's put that to Laura. Michelle, thank you very much for explaining your situation. Laura, listening to that, what's your view? Shouldn't that payment have gone to people like Michelle?
Well, yes, and I was obviously trying to work out, listening carefully to what Michelle was saying and also about her life with her 2 children. I used to be a lawyer before I was an MP, and I worked with some claimants who were migrating onto universal credit. And all I can say is that from the minute the universal credit scheme came in, it was always going to be a gradual kind of migration process. And I believe that's still the case, with the last people due to enrol by 2022. So there's about a year to go. I'm very sorry to hear about Michelle's circumstances, but I would just make the point that the government was aware that not everybody was on universal credit. And that's why they did things like they added another £1,000 last year to working tax credits. And also, throughout the country, and I can only talk about my constituency specifically, but there was the COVID Winter Grant Fund. Yeah. We got about £250,000 from central government that went to the local authority, and that was to support families that sort of fell outside the support systems that had been put in place. And that was to help with things like heating costs, food, white goods that could be replaced. And I directed quite a lot of my constituents there for several months, and they were getting really good support through the local authority. So look, I know it's been said and it can sound like a line, but we have done everything we can to sort of wrap our arms around the country. And actually, we have tried to think as creatively as possible about people who may not qualify for one form of benefit or another. But yes, I do believe that we're getting close to the end of the rollout process for universal credit.
All right. Paul, listening to both Michelle and Laura, what do you think the government will do?
Well, it seems though Rishi Sunak is going to extend universal credit, certainly for the main benefit of universal credit. The question is just for how long. I suspect he will be smart enough to realise, look, I've got to neutralise this issue and I've got to extend it for at least 6 or 7 months until the next autumn statement, whenever that is. That might be October, maybe November. That buys people time to cope, just to see how the summer pans out. Because don't forget, the most important thing to remember here is a lot of people are going to be expected to be made unemployed this year. On the OBR's own forecast, it's going to be 2024 until employment reaches pre-pandemic levels. That's a long way away. So a lot of people for the first time in their lives are going to go on universal credit. They've never been on a benefit before, and they're going to be a bit surprised, shall we say, what they find, particularly if they're told that they're going to lose this extra £20 that other people have had. So politically, it's really important. But I think Therese Coffey, the Work and Pensions Secretary, seems to have won the internal battle in Whitehall to make sure it's not a one-off payment and to make sure it's longer than, say, 3 months. All
right, well, we're going to find out, of course, more detail tomorrow in the budget. Don't forget to join us on Politics Live from 11:15 for PMQs and the budget that follows from Rishi Sunak.